George Jetson.
Welcome back to Americanuck Radio. Remember when people thought that this was what the future would look like? Hey, cars with big bubble domes over them flying all over the place, and sidewalks were actually conveyor belts so nobody would have to walk. It's kind of like that, except that people are kind of wired up in their home, you know what I mean? Ordering food on Amazon and never having to leave the house, making all their money online. As promised, the reason I brought that up is because the future is here, and it is friendly. We've got David Bross, a nationally award-winning journalist. Bross has written about the commercial satellite, the space industry for 30 years. He currently is a freelance journalist in the Washington, D.C. area. There's a lot more in this guy's bio, but in the interest of time, I'm going to keep it short and sweet. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mike, Super Don Ria. Great to be back on with you guys again.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we've got a number of things that I want to talk about with you. We've got President Trump setting up the fifth branch of the military, the Space Force. I wish I had an echo every time I said that. But with this story that has come out recently about this Russian satellite that is behaving strangely, and everybody's freaking out about it. I was reading a little bit about it. I guess it can shoot out other satellites that turn into other satellites, and I don't understand it fully. You are definitely somebody that knows about this stuff, so I'm going to turn it over to you. Let everybody listening know exactly what the concern is with this satellite, and then give us your thoughts on it. Dave, you got the floor.
My pleasure. Well, this week there was a story that moved on the wires, and I hopped on it right away because I wanted to talk to some of my sources about this, about a Russian satellite that NORAD, the North American radar tracking capabilities that we have for the Defense Department, that NORAD was tracking, that was moving in a very, let's just say, not normal way. It was not moving the way satellites normally move using station-keeping fuel, and I'll try to explain this in a way that will make it kind of interesting for your audience. People are so conditioned to Star Trek and Star Wars to seeing the way something moves is, a thruster fires and red flames come out the back of an engine and something moves in space. That's not what it's like at all. The way we move our International Space Station and our satellites in orbit is with little puffs of air. Because there's almost no gravitational pull where they are in orbit, especially in the geosynchronous orbit, which is where we're going to be talking about today. That's 22,300 miles straight up from the equator. In order to move a satellite, you just put little puffs of air that come out of a fuel tank. Just picture like a helium tank that you blow helium balloons up with. Store it on a satellite, and when they need to move it, they just let loose little puffs of air, and that will move a gigantic 6-ton piece of metal. It just will.
Because there's nothing to get it in the way.
Exactly. And however, though, it does use up that fuel. Fuel meaning little puffs of air. So you try to sparingly move satellites. You do it only when there might be a piece of space junk headed toward them, or when the Earth's gravity has begun to degrade their orbit and they're slowly moving in. You need to push them back out. That's called station keeping. Well, if you station keep enough, eventually you run out of little puffs of air. Your helium tank gets depleted, and the satellite then will deorbit. What was so different this week is they noticed this Russian satellite moving often and in different directions. And that's very puzzling because you cannot move a satellite the size of the Russian satellite that is in orbit without seriously degrading its in-orbit life, because you're running out of helium or compressed air in your little tank that you have on board.
Right, so why burn it all out just messing around like that? What's the deal?
Correct. So it's led people to speculate, and I talked to people at the Pentagon, that they may be using some other type of propulsion device on their satellite. It could be something using gyroscopes and harnessing the Earth's and the Sun's gravity. It could be something electromagnetic. It could be something with lasers that they're using to power these birds. But it's very odd because normally when, let's say, a telecommunications satellite, let's say DirecTV. A DirecTV satellite is getting old and starts to deorbit. When you station keep when you let the little puff of air out, it only goes in a straight line. You don't zigzag. You don't make right-angled turns. You don't go left and right. You go straight. This satellite was not doing that. It was maneuvering as if you were in your car or if you were in your Jetsons bubble plane. You go left and right, and that is very concerning.
Yeah, I would say it would be concerning if it was a military satellite or if it was, or any kind of an enemy, I guess. But it would be concerning if they were the only ones that had that technology, correct?
Correct. But luckily, we can all sleep well at night, and this goes well before the proposed Space Force, in knowing that we, the United States, have not only technology very similar to this, but probably 2 generations beyond what the Russians showed us this week, if so to speak.
Yeah, see, and I would have thought that to begin with. You hear all this fear-mongering in the media of something that the Russians have or that China has or whatever, but I mean, the amount of money that's poured into R&D in the United States and the brain power that we have, and just the military-industrial complex is so massive, not to mention the private sector and the money that's being generated there. I always think to myself, this sounds like fear-mongering to me, and I bet you we've got something better. Do you agree?
Yes, we do. Well, I can tell you for a fact we do. I don't know exactly what it is. My sources wouldn't tell me because obviously it is extremely classified. It is It is beyond top secret. It is eyes only, information. But I was told to sleep well. That was the quote. They said, "Dave, sleep well."
That's it. Hey, listen to that, everybody, right here on Americanuck Radio. Highly classified information, no specifics, but we've got better kick-ass satellites. That is awesome, man.
Absolutely.
Do you know
something to that?
Yeah, do it.
I would categorize things this way. The Russians have quantity in just about everything they do. We have quality. And we have always put our chips down on the board, on the table, on the green felt table, on the quality argument, and it has won the day for us just about in our entire history as a country, 230-something years. It has been a good bet. What is worrisome is that their quantity, let's say these new satellites they have, could overwhelm our ability to defend. All that they have to do with their low-tech satellites is float them next to one of our satellites and detonate it.
Right.
Or crash right into our satellite. Or just move in front of the satellite. Don't even touch it. Just move in front of it to prevent the line-of-sight telecommunications capabilities to get to Earth. And suddenly we have no ATMs, no supply chain technology, power grids go down, no banking,
communication,
telecom, all cell phones, everything goes down.
No TV.
No TV, no internet.
People would die over that.
No, and no internet, Mike, because the internet is timed from space.
That's amazing. And so, but wait a minute. Whoa. Going back to Reagan, he was remember the whole Star Wars program and everything?
Yes.
I mean, did that just get scrapped, or I mean, there's obviously you obviously would have the military working with NASA on secret projects, right?
Yes, there's all kinds of space-based Star Wars testing going on. The most prominent being the NASA's X-37B mystery spacecraft that is now launchable on board an Elon Musk Falcon 9 rocket, of all things, that spends a year in space at a time and is doing some very, very classified things. That's largely believed to be long-term Mars-type experimentation for survivability, and also military lasers.
That was my other question, was lasers. Like, do you ever... I hear the music, and that means we're going into a break. I'm going to stop this conversation right now. When we get back, we're going to talk about Space Force, the 5th branch of the U.S. military. And the mind just goes crazy thinking about what this is going to look like someday. And, I mean, the U.S. is going to be so far ahead of everybody technologically, especially Canada. We'll be back right after this.
Usted Go. Retro. Go. Vital. We go flight. Guidance. Guidance go. Launch control, this is Houston. We are go for launch.
Americanuck Radio.
Well, that was an oddly fitting bumper for the segment. I didn't even know it had the launch thing in there. We're back with Dave Bross, launch and satellite writer for over 30 years out in the Washington, D.C. area. To talk about Space Force. Had a very interesting question from our board op. Will Space Force get lightsabers? The answer was no. Mr. Dave Bross, everybody, we brought him back around. Donald John Trump has announced that they are going to be creating Space Force, the fifth branch of the military. And I often wonder, Dave, if the timing of these stories coincide with that. I mean, normally if the Pentagon knew about something, say there was this Russian satellite that, was kind of a threat, could be, might not be, whatever, why would they release that information to the public? Well, I mean, boom, we've got this new fifth branch of the military, and, well, we've got to have that because the Russians have advanced satellites. You hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do hear what you're saying, and I would posit to you that it's the exact opposite, that the Russians reacted to our announcement of the Space Force by having this demonstration of this on-orbit technology that they showed us this week.
Right.
This is my sword's bigger than your sword thing.
Okay, we've got zipping around satellites. What do you got? Yeah, okay. So now we talked about in the other segment, right, that there's been space-based weapons testing this whole time. The military, the Pentagon, has obviously been working with NASA. They're both government agencies. And, you've got the private sector with Elon Musk. I bet you the Pentagon and NASA are very interested in what he's doing and probably have a hand in it somewhere, I'm guessing. But why announce an official fifth branch of the military for a official Space Force when this has already been going on this whole time? Mr. Bross, go ahead.
Well, as you know, here in the D.C. swamp, there are little fiefdoms, little kingdoms that are set up from power brokers and the private sector companies that want to continue to funnel a constant stream of revenue into their companies to improve their bottom lines and hence please their investors and up their stock values. So a lot of this is what President Eisenhower talked about, the military-industrial complex. And like you, I identify myself as a libertarian, so I'm not necessarily always so gung-ho about creating new giant bureaucracies and another big situation that has to be funded and staffed and built out and everything else. But here's the deal. This already exists, and it's already being argued and has been for at least 25 years. We've had a de facto Space Force.
Right.
And it's been decentralized, and oftentimes decentralization is good, but it's been decentralized in the budget in so many pockets around the federal budget, the DoD infrastructure, that I think it really makes sense to combine all of this into one area, see if there are cost efficiencies, and this president certainly is an expert on cutting costs and cost efficiencies and doing things better, cheaper, faster. And I think that perhaps the time has come for this. I really do, and I'm not always big for creating another department and another cabinet level post, but this is probably warranted.
Very interesting. Rhea Bowe has a couple of questions for you. I'm going to leave it over to you. Rhea, go ahead and spit her on out to Dave here. What do you got in mind?
I love listening to you, Dave. You are clearly a man of space, and I'm looking in the chat room, and I have a couple of questions for you. Clearly, the suspicion of war going to space looks as though it's en route. But more to the point, do you believe in aliens, and have we ever been visited by UFOs?
Well, I'm telling you, this is amazing that you're asking this question, because I told Mike that I wanted to talk about something else about the Space Force that's rather conspiratorial, but I think should be on the table, and it's related to what you just asked. There are people that I've spoken to, some sources within the government, low-level sources that would be speculating about this, and also people in the paranormal UFO community that I also like to run in as well as a hobby. And there has been a very interesting theory posited to me in the last month or so that perhaps the creation of the Space Force and the announcement is a very deliberate attempt by the president to finally move us to what's known in the UFO community as disclosure. The official disclosing by the U.S. government or officials that indeed we have had contact or something that is beyond what we can explain, and confirming it officially to the government about UFOs and ETs, that this could be a backdoor way to get that done.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
That's an interesting theory, man. I mean, I'm not big on the whole thing. I think it would be cool if there was, but I think if there's aliens, we should immediately declare war on them once Space Force is up and running and kick all their asses, all their little green butts.
And let me add this, that I had the pleasure of interviewing the very second director of Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works in Southern California before he passed. I had a chance to talk with him, and I asked him, this was over dinner, I asked him where the new generation, the gee-whiz next generation technology in space is going to come from. And after his third glass of wine, he looked at me and said, it already exists.
So what all does that entail?
We can do things that only could have been some type of hybrid between what we have, our science, and science from someplace else. And I looked at him, I said, are you serious? And he said, you didn't hear it from me.
And that was it? You just left it at that?
Yes, because he wouldn't go any further.
And then he died.
And then he died. And I also had the great pleasure of interviewing Sir Arthur C. Clarke, who is considered to be the father of the commercial satellite industry. Arthur C. Clarke is the author of 2001, The Space Odyssey, and many, many other science fiction dime store novels, 600 or so. I got to speak to him from his compound on the island of Sri Lanka before he died. Of course, he was knighted by the Queen, the whole nine yards. And he speculated that mathematically, and this guy's brilliant, and boy, did he give me an education in a 2-hour phone call. I learned more from him than I did in my first 10 years in the satellite industry. He said to me, using mathematics that he jotted out on a yellow legal pad once in his study, that he can prove mathematically that ETs exist and that we've probably actually had contact with them.
With math.
So this is very far afield. This is very paranormal and very conspiratorial. I get it. I don't write about that, obviously, because you can't prove it. What are you going to do? But it certainly is interesting that this is coming out right now when there's so much pressure on the government to disclose.
That is interesting, and I don't mind having the conversation one little bit. I mean, that's what people are talking about, right? And it's not like it's a fringe element. There's like a huge, when you say conspiracy or paranormal community, I mean, look at Coast to Coast AM. That's like arguably the biggest AM radio show on the planet, and they regularly talk about these things. I get these guys that contact me, and they're likable guys, but they get on this thing where, have you ever heard of Billy Meyer? Billy Meyer knows the aliens, and he's predicted everything that's coming, and America's going to be destroyed by racism, and you've got to listen to me. And I'm like, no, I don't. I don't have to. I don't care, man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just want to make one last point, because I know your time is getting short, and that is that I don't want this nutty paranormal side that we've been talking about the Space Force to sully or to color the true seriousness of the proposal. I mean, this could really save the U.S. taxpayer a lot of money if it's done right, and I wouldn't trust it to be done right, basically under any administration that we've had recently, except for this one, which is really, really bent on saving the taxpayer a lot of money.
Right, and they obviously there's something to it. I mean, he wouldn't just come out and announce this and have it created just out of the blue because he felt like it one morning when he was looking at his cornflakes. No, there's bigger reasons for this than we are privy to, and that's just all there is to it. But whatever it is, I trust the guy. I don't know. Maybe he seems to have a very close relationship with the military, and this might be something that they had been buying for this whole time, but the Clinton, Bush, Obama crowd kiboshed it. Do you think so?
Boy, you said it better than I could. I agree with everything you just said. Yes, 100%.
Yeah,
I believe that his closest generals are recommending this to him, and that's what the sources here in the swamp have told me.
That is so cool, man. Yeah, you know what? I love talking to you. I called Dave this morning to talk about having him on the show. I think we went on for about an hour, and I said, I got to stop. We got to save some stuff for the show. Dave, thanks so much for coming on Americanuck Radio, slicing cutting-edge information you're not going to hear anywhere else, everybody. Stick around for the second hour. I can't believe the first one's over.